Hello and welcome to Module 1 of the SBH Teaching Kitchen's online cooking series. My name is Emily. I'm a chef and a registered dietitian, and in today's lesson I'm going to show you how to roast vegetables. Roasting is a really simple and easy way to get a lot of really great flavor into those vegetables, and once you know how to do it, you don't need a recipe in order to roast whatever you have on hand. So in today's lesson, I'm going to show you a variety of different vegetables that you can roast and go over different oven temperatures and roasting times that you may need for those different vegetables. So let's go ahead and get started. Cherry and grape tomatoes are probably the easiest to roast because you don't need to cut them first. Just dump the container onto a pan lined with parchment paper or tin foil. Then we will add a drizzle of olive oil, about 1 teaspoon, and a pinch of salt, about 1/8 of a teaspoon. Use your hands to toss everything together. You could also do this in a bowl, but by doing it directly on the pan, you're making one less dish. Once everything is evenly coated, make sure that everything is spread out in an even layer, and then place in the oven. After 10 minutes at 425 degrees, you can see that the tomatoes are starting to brown, blister, and burst open. A few of the tomatoes have not yet burst open, so we will continue to bake these. After 5 more minutes in the oven, you can see that most of the tomatoes have finally burst open. There are 2 that haven't yet, but as they continue to cool, they will begin to look like the rest of the tomatoes. You could continue to bake these if you want a deeper caramelization of the tomatoes, but for me, these are perfect. Next, we're going to roast an onion. I'm showing a red onion here, but this works for any type of onion. I'm going to show you 2 ways to cut the onion in order to roast it. First, cut both ends off, then cut the onion in half. That makes it much easier to peel the onion. On one of the halves, we'll make a large dice, as shown. On the other half, we will cut the onion into a really thick julienne, or long, thin strips. These are about 1/2 inch thick. You could cut the onions smaller if you would like, but just know that they will roast for less time. Once your onions are on your baking sheet, go ahead and separate all of the layers of the onion. This extra step helps to make sure that everything will cook evenly. Now you can drizzle olive oil on your onions. Here we will use about 2 teaspoons, and we will use about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. I'm measuring the salt on my hands. An easy trick is to take a measuring spoon, measure 1/4 teaspoon of salt into the palm of your hand. Then you know what that looks like, so you don't have to use measuring spoons every time you need to measure out some salt. Toss everything together and make sure it's all evenly coated. Then place your pan into the oven. After 10 minutes, we can see that our onions have softened, and they are beginning to brown just a little bit. Go ahead and stir the onions, just to make sure that all of the sides will evenly roast. And place back in the oven. After an additional 10 minutes, our onions are nice and browned and very soft. They are caramelized and they will be delicious. Next, we will roast a zucchini. This technique will also work on a yellow squash. Start by trimming off the ends. I will show you 2 ways to cut the zucchini. Start by cutting it in half. On one half, cut it in half lengthwise, then in half again lengthwise, to quarter that half of the zucchini. From here, we can make a large dice by lining up the slices and dicing it as shown. On the other half of the zucchini, we're going to cut it into thin rounds. You can cut the rounds as thin or as thick as you would like, but know that the thinner you cut your rounds, the crispier they will be. Start to spread out your zucchini, but they don't need to be perfect yet. We still need to add our drizzle of olive oil, about 2 teaspoons, and then we will add 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You could also add some other seasonings if you would like. Here I'm adding crushed black pepper. Now toss everything to coat. Once everything is evenly coated in the oil and seasonings, make sure to evenly spread out the pieces of zucchini. They do release a lot of moisture as they cook, so if they are piled on top of each other, your zucchini will get soggy instead of getting nice and crispy. Then place into your oven. After 15 minutes, our zucchini are beginning to get soft, but they're not quite brown yet. Go ahead and flip over the rounds of zucchini so that they will evenly brown. You can see that for me the pieces on the edges are more brown than the pieces in the center, so I'm going to rotate them and make sure that they're going to evenly cook. After an additional 15 minutes, our zucchini is nice and browned. The zucchini rounds will be really crispy and delicious. Next, we're going to roast cauliflower. You can buy cauliflower pre-cut, but if you buy it as the head, I will show you an easy way to cut it. Start by cutting it in half, and then in half again, to make 4/4 of that cauliflower. The cauliflower does have a very thick stalk in the middle, and we want to remove that. Now that your cauliflower is cut into quarters, you can use your knife and cut down at an angle to cut out that core. Repeat on the remaining 3/4 of the cauliflower. The cauliflower will start to naturally fall apart. Break it into pieces as evenly as you can. Any pieces that are about an inch in size or smaller can go ahead and go onto your baking sheet. The larger pieces we will go ahead and use our knife to cut into smaller pieces. The smaller your pieces, the quicker your cauliflower will roast. But in the end, the size that you want to cut it is really up to you. Once everything is cut and on your baking sheet, give that cauliflower a drizzle of oil. This will take about a tablespoon because there is a lot of cauliflower. And then we will add about 1/4 to 1/2 of a teaspoon of salt. I'm going to add some crushed black pepper here, but you could add any other seasonings that you like, and then use your hands to toss to coat. Once everything is evenly coated in the oil and spices, be sure to spread the cauliflower into an even layer on the pan. You want to make sure that no pieces are overlapping each other because this will prevent them from roasting evenly. After 15 minutes, the cauliflower is starting to get soft, but will still be crunchy if you were to bite into it. You can see that some of the pieces are starting to brown, so go ahead and give that a stir to make sure everything roasts evenly. And place that back into the oven. After an additional 15 minutes, the cauliflower will be soft and nicely browned. Next, I'm going to show you how to roast root vegetables. Here I'm showing a carrot and a sweet potato, but this method will work for any other root vegetable, such as parsnips, beets, and regular potatoes. Start by peeling your vegetables. This is optional, you can leave the skins on if you would like. First we'll cut the carrot. Start by cutting the ends off. Then, because the carrot's very long, I like to cut it into 3 smaller pieces. We're going to cut this into a large dice, so cut it in half lengthwise, then in half again. Line up the pieces and make a large dice as shown. You can also cut your carrots into an oblique shape, also known as a roll cut. Place your knife at an angle, and then cut down on the carrot, rolling it between each cut to create a carrot that has 2 angled sides. If the carrot is very thick, you can cut it in half first before doing this cut. Next, we will cut the sweet potato into a large dice. Cut the potato into planks first, then cut it into strips, line those strips up, and make a dice as shown. Next, give your vegetables a drizzle of oil, about 2 teaspoons here. Then we will add about 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So about 1/8 of a teaspoon on the carrots and 1/8 of a teaspoon on the sweet potatoes. Then I will add some crushed black pepper. Toss everything to coat and then make sure everything is evenly spaced apart. Place in the oven. After 15 minutes, our vegetables are starting to brown and get soft, but are still quite raw on the inside. Give everything a stir and place back into the oven. After an additional 15 minutes, our vegetables are soft on the inside and nicely browned and crisp on the outside. Next, we will show you how to roast butternut squash. I recommend wearing gloves because it does release a film that can get stuck to your hands. Start by cutting off the ends of the squash. I'm going to show you 2 ways to roast the squash, so I'm going to start by cutting it in half lengthwise. If your squash is very big, I would cut it in half the other way first before attempting this. You can see that the squash has seeds on the insides, so we're going to go ahead and scoop those out. One half of the squash we're going to roast whole, the other we will dice. The piece that we're going to dice, we're going to go ahead and peel. Separate the two ends of the squash, and then cut the squash into long, thin planks. From here, you can cut the planks into long strips, and then you can line those up and dice them. Repeat on the other plank of the squash. The seed portion of the squash is a bit trickier to cut, but we will also cut this into planks. And then you can use your knife on the end that has a hole in the middle to go around and cut that into cubes. The last piece of the squash we will dice just as before. Add a drizzle of olive oil to both types of squash. We will use about a tablespoon here because there is a lot of squash. Then go ahead and add your salt. We're going to use about a half a teaspoon here. Use your hands to toss everything to coat. On the piece that we are leaving whole, rub the oil into the cut side and place that side down so the skin side is showing. By cooking it this way, the squash will steam itself. Spread everything into an even layer and bake. After 15 minutes, the squash is starting to get soft but is still quite raw in the middle. To check the piece that we are leaving whole, flip it over and use a fork to pierce the inside. If you get resistance, it's not quite done yet. Flip that back over and place in the oven. After an additional 15 minutes, the squash is soft and nicely roasted. On the piece that we left whole, you should be able to easily scoop out the flesh with a fork or a spoon, or you can easily peel the skin away. Next, we're going to roast broccoli. The great thing about broccoli is we can actually use all of the broccoli, the stems and the crowns. Start by cutting the bottoms off of the broccoli. Separate the stems from the crowns. The stems are a bit thicker and do take longer to cook, so I like to cut them smaller than I would my crowns so that everything cooks in the same amount of time. Start by cutting them in half lengthwise, and then in half again to cut those stems into quarters. Line those pieces up and dice them as shown. These are about a 1/4 inch size dice. Just in case, we will keep the stems separate from the crowns in case they need a little extra time to cook. For the crowns, we want them to be about 1 inch in size. Anything that's big, you can go ahead and cut into a smaller piece. Now use the tip of your knife to go around and cut off individual crowns of the broccoli. Once you get into the center, you can cut off any additional stem and break apart those pieces. Any pieces that are too big, you can cut in half with your knife, and if you would like, you can separate any extra stem and place it with the stems that we are going to roast. Repeat that with any remaining broccoli. Again, you want to make sure that everything is about the same size so that it roasts evenly. Give your broccoli a drizzle of oil, about 2 teaspoons here. Then we will use about a half a teaspoon of salt. Toss your broccoli to make sure it's evenly coated in oil and spread in an even layer. Place in the oven. After 15 minutes, our broccoli is starting to get soft and lightly browned, but is not quite done yet. It will still be pretty raw if you were to bite into it. Toss everything to make sure that it roasts evenly and place back in the oven. After an additional 15 minutes, everything is soft, but not mushy, and nicely browned. Next, we will cut mushrooms. These have been cleaned with a damp paper towel. I'm going to show you a few different ways we can cut the mushrooms. We can cut them in half, and with these we can leave the stem on. We could also cut the mushrooms into quarters if we want smaller pieces. Finally, we could cut the mushrooms into thin slices. This really depends on what you're going to use the mushrooms for or how you like to eat them. Once everything is cut, arrange them on a pan lined with parchment paper. I'm going to keep everything separate in case some pieces take longer to cook than others. Add a drizzle of olive oil, about 2 teaspoons here, and about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Add any additional seasonings. Here I'm adding black pepper, and then toss to coat. Mushrooms do absorb a lot of oil, so work quickly here to make sure everything gets evenly coated. Spread everything in an even layer and then place in the oven. After 10 minutes, you can see that the mushrooms have shrunk a lot and are beginning to brown, but we will continue to bake them. After an additional 10 minutes, we can see that the mushrooms have decreased a lot in size, are nice and soft and evenly browned. Once everything is done roasting, you can see we have a rainbow of vegetables at our disposal that we can use in future meals. I highly recommend roasting a lot of vegetables at one time, as this makes meal prep much easier. Thank you for joining us for this video on how to roast vegetables, and we will see you again for the next one.